Hello, this is D, and I'm back with another video. Well, today we're on the fourth day of the Microsoft versus FTC hearing. We got a lot of people coming to stand today. Activision Blizzard CEO Kotick will be taking the stand, as well as Satya Nadella. So I'm expecting a lot of bombshells today. Now, the FTC is running out of time, and they have to prove their case. Now, so far, they haven't proved their case. Everything has fallen flat. I will say this, giving you guys a little bit of a spoiler like usual. They did have a better argument today, but is it going to help them in their case, or did they just perform better? Now, Kotick took to the stand, and he started off the day with an anecdote. Now, his company's history started in this very building where they also have the United States Bankruptcy Court, and they acquired Activision trademark here. So this court now is going to have a significant meaning, I would say, in the history of Activision. Because if this deal goes through, then, it's the end of his journey, because he's now going to be selling his company over to Microsoft. He's going to be cashing out, so to speak. Okay, so today we're going to cover TheVerge.com. I'll leave a link in the description down below so you guys can check it out for yourself. So Kotick basically said Sony is an extraordinary consumer electronics company. They invented the Walkman, co-invented the CD, and they're one of the great pioneers and companies. He also talked about how gaming is different from movies and TVs. The business is much more about you experiencing something and feeling like you're taking action. Now, to be clear to you guys out there, because you're not in the courts, so you're not hearing everything that's happening, this is Microsoft presenting its case. So they're calling him to the stand. So they're asking the questions right now, and afterwards, the FTC is going to get in there and ask their own set of questions as well. A new version of Call of Duty arrives pretty much every year, and EA's Medal of Honor inspired the game. People at Activision were playing it, says Kotick. It provides endless conflicts in history to build yearly releases. We had to instill a compensation and reward system to keep people motivated to work on the sequels. Now he was asked, why isn't Call of Duty exclusive to a single platform? You would alienate 100 million monthly active players, said Activision CEO Kotick. You would have a revolt if you were to remove the game from one platform. Gamers are incredibly passionate, and you get invested in the experience. It's like a sport. And I've always agreed with the sentiment. Now, when this was first announced that Microsoft was going to buy Activision, was saying that Call of Duty should be exclusive. And I was saying, no, this game shouldn't be an exclusive because it's on every platform. It's one of the biggest games in the world. It generates too much money. The argument on some people's side was that, oh, it'll bring people over to Xbox. Everyone's going to have to buy an Xbox. And I said simply, no, people aren't just going to buy an Xbox because this game is on there. You'll get some people, but you're not going to get all the people. And it's not going to be worth removing it from the platform because you lose too much revenue. And this has been argued through the whole trial. And I honestly believe that Microsoft is going to keep Call of Duty on the PlayStation because they need it. It has to be there because the revenue that game generates yearly, they've calculated into the purchase of this company. Microsoft wanted to acquire Square Enix as part of a plan for a mobile Game Pass. Now, this is a doozy because we know that Square Enix, they do a lot of business with Sony. In fact, their recent game Final Fantasy was not on the Xbox because Sony paid to have it exclusive on the PlayStation 5. Anyways, the news comes from an internal document released part of the FTC versus Microsoft hearings, which previously revealed that Microsoft had considered other big names like Sega and Bungie. According to the documents, Microsoft had a number of reasons for being interested in Square Enix. Part of it was to bolster Xbox's historically scant presence in the Asian markets. There was another obvious reason to add more content to drive the growth of Xbox Game Pass through blockbuster Square Enix releases, as well as the company's extensive back catalog. So this just shows you how serious Microsoft is. They are really making a play. They want to compete. They took it to heart when gamers said that there's not games to play on the Xbox, that it's not a good brand. I'll be honest with you guys, last generation Xbox, it was hard to be a fan. It really was. And this generation, they came out pretty good, and they kind of pitter-pattered a little bit, and we're waiting for these games to come out, and obviously we're waiting for this acquisition to go through. Now, Sony messed up with redactions in its documents. Apparently, the marker that they use when it's photocopied, you can see right through it. So all of this information was leaked, and there's nothing they could do about it because it was public. So all of the outlets, everybody has it. We're looking at it right now on the screen. It is what it is here, man, and that's pretty crazy. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later on. Now, Bobby Kotick discusses Sony's claim if Microsoft could degrade Call of Duty on the PlayStation. And before we get into this, yesterday, one of the developers over there, he said it was an asinine statement by Jim Ryan to suggest that any type of developer, any type of publisher that would purposely degrade a game to be on another platform. So that was a lie right there, and honestly, it was a complete insult to developers around the world. Anyways, he goes on to say the vitriol from gamers would be well deserved. People would make video games have a great pride in work and what they do. Now, that's a pretty damning statement right there. It rebukes everything that Jim Ryan said, and that developer that came out yesterday and said it as well. Obviously, that wasn't said in court, but this was, and it was by a key person, Activision CEO Bobby Kotick. Now, Microsoft lawyer points out there are different maps and weapons and platforms, and Kotick says not having these isn't degrading a game, it's marketing. Sony currently has a marketing deal with Activision for Call of Duty, and we all know this. Get this map here first, get this skin only on the PlayStation. They always have a bundled deal. Now, we're finding a lot more interesting things here, and I'm going to be honest with you, we find some really interesting things about Call of Duty later on today. Now, they were talking about World of Warcraft, and Judge Corley, she intervened and wanted to know why anyone would pay $15 a month for a World of Warcraft instead of $70 for a game. It was developed almost 20 years ago, answered Kotick, and it's really a rich experience where we're playing for longer hours than most, and historically what we've done is the content that you wouldn't have necessarily paid for, so you pay $15 so you can access the content over time. Now they ask him about Game Pass, and I'm going to be honest with you guys here, I was surprised and I was wrong. So let's just get into it. He goes, I have a general aversion of the idea of multi-game subscription services. Maybe part of it being in Los Angeles and having a large big media companies move their content to these subscription services, and business results have suffered. He confirms he wouldn't put Call of Duty on a subscription service and that currently Activision is generating no revenues from this kind of services. Kotick also says the company has experience with a few streaming services but has no plans to put games on the streaming services. So he agrees here with Jim Ryan. So Jim Ryan actually wasn't lying on this issue. He was telling the truth. Bobby Kotick does not think this is good for games. He doesn't like the service. Now, the judge stepped in and asked him, why are you selling this company if you don't agree with this deal? And he said, well, I can agree to disagree with them on some issues. They have a different vision than what I would do. And I would even go back to his testimony where he says other big subscription streaming services, they're losing money because they went to that model. This is a completely different industry. I don't think you can correlate what's happening over there with video games. Game Pass is doing pretty good. People are still going to buy games. And honestly, he's selling the company, and it's not going to be his concern anymore. And his shareholders are for this deal. And I'm just going to be honest with you. Sometimes in life, you got to step aside and let somebody else take over the reins. Things change. Things do not always remain the same, and you have to evolve and you have to grow. There's a lot of people I remember when they announced digital games, they were so against digital games. I want a physical copy. I want a physical copy. I want a physical copy. And now look at it. Hardly anyone owns physical copies of the new games. Yes, we still get them from time to time, but most of us, we don't care. It doesn't matter. Now, there's certain instances when it does matter. I'll be honest with you, like that Spider-Man edition that doesn't have a physical copy in it. And we're also hearing that Starfield doesn't have a physical copy in it. And they're selling it for the same price. So I don't see a value there, and I don't like that trend. So that's a completely different issue. That's just my thoughts on it. I think Microsoft has a grasp on what they're going to do. And I believe by the end of the day, we're going to have a clear view of Microsoft's plans when they acquire Activision. Now the FTC is taking over and they're questioning how big Call of Duty is. The FTC lawyer is now questioning Kotick. The FTC points out that Call of Duty was the #1 selling console game for 13 years in a row. Kotick confirms this is correct. He also confirms that Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 made $1 billion within 10 days of launching in 2022. It was also the highest grossing entertainment opening. That includes games, TVs, movies. But Kotick says it's more comparable to the box office figures. Then the FTC points out that no other console game has had such a successful launch. And Kotick replied, I think we're generally been the most successful of those games. The FTC points out that Call of Duty Vanguard was a rare disappointment for Activision. It was disappointing in the commercial results, said Kotick, but it was still #1 selling game for the console in 2021. Now that game, I never played it. I just was not interested in it. That was the only Call of Duty that I skipped. So it makes sense that that was the least played Call of Duty because I've played all of them. And I know a lot of gamers didn't like that game. Now the FTC is questioning Kotick once again on multi-subscription services. The FTC points out that Activision's core business is making games. It doesn't make a console. It doesn't have a subscription service like Xbox Game Pass and doesn't offer cloud streaming services. What this all means is Activision has an incentive to be everywhere. Now the FTC asks, Activision has signed a deal to offer Call of Duty first on other platforms, right? Kotick, it's possible. FTC points out that Activision hasn't made a formal decision about not putting out its games on subscription service. We'd evaluate, said Kotick, and Activision has experimented. Generally speaking, I don't believe that a multi-subscription service for games is the best way to enable players to make their investments. Now, the FTC also points out in previous testimony that Kotick mentioned some themes are on Sony's subscription service and that no formal decision has been made to offer other content. Kotick agrees that there could be a strategic reason to offer content on game subscriptions for a smaller duration of time, but not something sustainable. So he doesn't agree with the model here. So I'll give the FTC some points today. However, the truth of the matter is that the investors want this deal to go through. He wants this deal to go through. Even though he has a different vision, obviously he would because it's his company. Someone's going to buy your company. They're not going to do everything exactly the same. Of course, they're going to want to keep the model similar to what it's running at, but they're going to run it a little bit differently. And I'm sure that he gets that because he agreed to this deal. Now they asked Activision why they removed their games off of GeForce Now, and he basically said the removal was after the beta period because they didn't have any type of license. So it looks like they wanted to do a deal and Nvidia just pulled their games. Now they had an internal email that Kotick discussed a potential commercial agreement to bring Activision games back to GeForce Now, and that he had a meeting with Nvidia CEO and he had a bunch of talking points. Now, the FTC is trying to paint a picture that Activision will put its games on a subscription service and cloud services if the price is right, if it could negotiate favorable commercial terms. I don't know. That's a bit about nothing. I think this is for them trying to build their case. I don't see what it has to do with anything, but we'll see in the closing arguments. Now, big testimony from Kotick over Call of Duty on the Nintendo Switch. As you know, the FTC is trying to paint a picture that the Nintendo Switch cannot handle Call of Duty, and Bobby Kotick, he puts that to rest. Now, the FTC was pushing Bobby Kotick on mobile and Switch games like Call of Duty, and Activision partnered with Tencent because Kotick admits we couldn't make that game on our own at that time. The FTC is arguing that Activision doesn't have the experience to make Call of Duty on mobile, so why would Microsoft be able to create a version for the Switch? Now, Kotick's response, I believe, is another dagger in the FTC's case. Now, he says literally from a high level, they could evaluate what would be required, what they would need to envision a game that might make it work on the Switch. The FTC then reveals that Kotick only found out about the Nintendo Switch version of Call of Duty from a news report, and that the agreement also purports to bring a future Call of Duty game to a future Nintendo console. Now, right here is very important. I told you guys that the Call of Duty that Microsoft is promising is most likely for the next Nintendo console that I would reckon is coming out next year. It might even get announced this year because we're starting to get some stuff here. It's starting to leak. He goes on to say we would consider it once we had the specs, but we don't have them at present. We missed out on the opportunity for the past generation of the Switch, but we have to wait until the specifications. We don't have any present plans to do so. Now they take a look at his previous testimony, and he said, I actually think we'll likely make a Call of Duty game for a Nintendo console. I can't tell you if there are specific plans, but I can tell you it's something we'd consider. Now, Judge Corley intervenes. If the merger doesn't go through, you said you made a mistake with the Switch. You're not going to make that mistake again. What would be a reason not to? Kotick responded saying if we don't have the resources and if there was something wrong with the specifications. Judge Corley asks again, so you'd like to be able to put Call of Duty on the Nintendo Switch? I think we would consider it, and if it's something where we could make a great game, we'd likely consider it. Now, in that testimony, he also mentioned that the game could run on the current Switch, that they'd have to make an evaluation. However, he was confident that Activision and Microsoft, that they could make a game running on the current Switch, and of course, we know it's going to run on the next Switch. Okay, so it's a break right now. We're going to do a little bit of a recap. How does Activision make Call of Duty every year? He explained that. He regrets not bringing Call of Duty to the Switch. We found out why Activision removed their games from GeForce Now. As well, the company does plan to put future Call of Duties on the Switch. It's something they're going to consider. They have to see the specifications. Now, some specs did leak out for the next Nintendo Switch. I don't know if it was in this trial because I'm kind of doing this in real time and stuff is flying all over Twitter. There's all kinds of leaks today. The FTC also asked Kotick the difference between Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 and Call of Duty Warzone. Warzone, of course, might be the one on the mobile version. Regarding Modern Warfare 2, it will get to the point where a lot of the content will be playable on the phone, says Kotick. But now the FTC cites previous statements where Kotick says playing it on the phone would be like using a refrigerator for a safe. Now, once again, we have to have context here. And the judge is really smart. That's why you have to present your case. He wasn't able to do it. He had to hire a company to make the mobile version. So he wasn't even capable of doing it because they didn't know how to do it. Now they do know how to do it because they have this company that made the mobile version. So obviously they can make a version for the Switch. Obviously, now they have their hand in the mobile market. So that was pretty much it for his testimony. He was excused from the stand. And next up, we have Dr. Bailey's testimony. Now, it was cut short yesterday. Now, once again, they get back into the Nintendo Switch. And my head just hurts that we're going to have to hear about this all over again. We just heard from Bobby Kotick that the game can run on the Switch, that Microsoft and Activision, they could get together and make this run on Switch. They hired a company that has a mobile version of the game. They obviously have access to this company. It's just common sense. The judge knows this. That's why I say it's very important to present your case. It's very clear that it can run on the Switch. And the FTC's argument is to say, no, it can't run on the Switch. Because if they admit that it can run on the Switch, that's good for consumers. That's a lot more people playing the game. It hasn't been on Nintendo Switch. This is going to be the first time that it's on that console. That's good for consumers. That's good for competition. And it throws all of their arguments away. So that's why they're trying so hard to paint the picture with the Nintendo Switch. Now, Dr. Bailey said she analyzed data from a 10-week period on the Switch, and she found a decline in number of gamers on Xbox and PlayStation console and game time hours. The FTC and Microsoft argue about the Switch every day because the FTC doesn't want to count the Switch out as a competitor to the Xbox, but Microsoft argues it is. Dr. Bailey's analysis shows that the Switch has an effect on gamer attention and where they spend their hours. If the Switch is included in the global console market, Dr. Bailey says no matter which metric we use, Xbox is in third place and has been for the last 5 years. So that's why the FTC is hedging their bets so hard on the Nintendo Switch. Their case is so weak. Now here comes the part where we get a lot of leaks. Now Sony messed up big time here with the redaction from the courts. And the FTC showed this, and it was there for everyone to see, and we now know how much Sony paid to make Horizon Forbidden West, The Last of Us Part 2, and more. Now, as you can see on the screen here, Forbidden West apparently cost $212 million over 5 years with 300 employees. The Last of Us Part 2, $220 million for some 200 employees. Now, I can't believe that they leaked this information in court. Apparently, the whiteout that they used, it wasn't really good, and you could see right through it, and you can see the numbers. So this has already been made public information, so that's it. It's leaked out. It's just there. There's nothing they can do about it now. Now, Microsoft argues about how gamers spend their time. Dr. Bailey points out that their data suggests that where gamers spend their time also matters, not just the hardware. The FTC doesn't count PCs into the console market, but Microsoft is trying to point out here that they still compete because they both largely play the same games, especially on Xbox. What I'm showing here in my report, there are the top 15 games that are played on Xbox and PlayStation. You can see that all those top 15 games are also available to play on PC, said Bailey. Many gamers multi-own and they already have a PC. It's a large percentage, and there's a lot more gamers on PC, to be honest with you guys. I'm one example of that. I play my games on my PC, I play them on my Asus ROG Ally, I play them on my Xbox, because they're all available in Game Pass. And even the games that aren't available in Game Pass, I can play them on PC. Like Resident Evil 4, it's available on PC. I can get it even cheaper with a higher graphic fidelity. So it is competition. It is another place where you can play your games. And the reason why the FTC wants to rule this out is because of their erroneous numbers. I'm just going to call it like it is. Their numbers just don't make sense. They only make sense when they exclude all these other divisions that are competitors, that gamers do play their games on. Now she goes on about Xbox Game Pass Ultimate users and if they actually use cloud gaming. Now he goes on to say that this is a key point for Microsoft, especially given that the Competition and Markets Authority, the CMA in the UK, appears to have counted all Game Pass subscribers as cloud users. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate includes Xbox Cloud Gaming, but Dr. Bailey claims not many people use it. What I found out with those Game Pass Ultimate gamers is a very small fraction of them access the cloud gaming feature. Their proportion of the game time hours through cloud gaming are even smaller. When they access that cloud gaming feature, the overwhelming majority of them are accessing it at least once through a console. Now, this aligns with what Xbox Sarah Bond testified that most Xbox Cloud Game users are using the service just to try games before they download them. Now, you got to remember that Dr. Bailey, she actually got metrics, the real hard data from Microsoft, so she could look at everything. Now, Judge Corley intervenes and asks if this aligns with Bond's testimony, and Dr. Bailey agrees. So, ding, 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 point for Microsoft lawyers. Once again, the FTC's case is being unraveled, but they are doing a much better job today. At least today, I can see the image that they're trying to paint. Unfortunately for them, the evidence just doesn't support it, but they're doing a much better job today. Sony says only one more Call of Duty game was guaranteed to come to the PlayStation. Now, Sony's marketing deal with Activision expired in 2024, but apparently it doesn't include a 2024 installment of COD. Now, the last game covered by the contract is Call of Duty, a title to be released late in 2023, and this reads by part of a letter from PlayStation boss Jim Ryan that Sony's lawyers didn't properly redact. Still, Microsoft reportedly planned to bring Call of Duty games to PlayStation with or without a contract, and Microsoft has reportedly promised the same. So we all know the situation. Microsoft has offered them time and time again a contract, and now I'm starting to see why Sony didn't sign it. Today I got kind of put to my attention some information what Sony wanted out of this deal. They apparently wanted Starfield to come to the PlayStation. They wanted some other Bethesda titles. They were asking for a host of things. So we have some emails here from Jim Ryan and Phil Spencer. Thanks for your response. As I stated to you in one of your emails in your calls, Sony's an important distributor of Activision content, and we'd like to find a way to maintain that relationship once we've closed the Activision acquisition. I continue to stand behind the written agreement I sent you on January 31st with my signature and our commitments to Sony. The agreement would keep all existing Activision console titles on Sony, including future versions of Call of Duty franchise or any other current Activision franchise on Sony, through December 31st, 2027. That includes content and feature parity, as well as making it clear that we would not feature any timed exclusive releases of such content on Xbox consoles. Now, if you ask me, that's more than generous, because we all know that if this deal was going the other way, if it was Sony buying Activision, this would not be happening. I don't know if they would remove it off of the Xbox platform because financially it wouldn't make sense, but they're not as big as PlayStation, so I don't know if it'd be such a huge financial hit to them. Maybe they would make it timed on their console, come out a week earlier or something like that. I don't think it would be straight parity across the board. Now, he goes on to say it's hard to align the principles set out in your email of May 26, 2022, with Sony leading the role in the market. As I said before, we believe that keeping these titles on Sony, as we did with Minecraft, is the right thing to do for the industry and the gamers. Now, this is the stuff that he's alluding to here. So as you look through here, you can see that he was saying that some of these games should be coming to the PlayStation as well. We believe these Bethesda games should be there. Regarding Bethesda, I was making a more general point during our discussions that equal treatment of Bethesda games would be a logical subject for the parties to discuss because it involves some of the same concerns as the availability and unequal treatment of Activision games. So this guy, he's trying to get these games on the PlayStation that are not exclusive. He's trying to get Starfield. He's trying to get other games that are not a part of the agreement. Microsoft is saying, hey, we're going to give you Call of Duty. They're saying, no, we don't want Call of Duty. We want some other games. Give us some of this exclusive stuff that you have over there, and then we'll sign the contract, and then we won't block your deal. That's just dirty business, man. And the email is here for you all to see. I'm not going to spend too much time going into it. Maybe we'll go into it later on. But Sony, man, they're really on one. And the FTC, shame on you for representing them. They have dirty tactics. They do a lot of anti-competitive stuff. It's been shown over and over during this trial, or I should say hearing, that Sony is the market leader. Now, the FTC says the term hypothetical, I'm not going to read the rest, man, appears 5 times in your report. Each of those are in the reference of a hypothetical monopolist test. And Bailey basically disagrees with Dr. Lee that he did a hypothetical Monty-Poly test. Now, I'm just going to skim over all that stuff because, man, that was just a mouthful to read. Now, we have some more documents here. And as you can see on the screen, the redaction is just awful. It was exposed again. And some people are saying, oh, the FTC did this on purpose so they could pass on some information to the CMA. I don't know about all of that, but I just know that it was very sloppy, that they didn't check that this was redacted properly. Now, this is coming from Jim Ryan, and like I said, they redacted the stuff, but it was just a fail. In 2021, 14 million users by device spent 30% or more of their time playing Call of Duty. Over 6 million users spent more than 70% of their time playing Call of Duty, and 1 million users spent 100% of their gaming time playing Call of Duty. In 2021, Call of Duty players spent an average of $116. He's got a question mark there, so he's not quite sure of it. 116 hours per year playing Call of Duty. Call of Duty players spending more than 70% of their time on Call of Duty spend an average of 296 hours on the franchise. Like I've said a million times, this game is a juggernaut. That's why you cannot take this game off of the PlayStation. That's why this game needs to be everywhere, because you're going to make the most revenue off of this game. 1 million users only played this game on the PlayStation. Like, that's the only game they played. When they turned off their PlayStation, that was it. When they turned it on, it was Call of Duty. That's a lot of players. So you can see why Sony is trying to make the argument that Call of Duty is the most important thing to them. And I do believe it would hurt them not being on there. I don't think it would change them from being the market leader, for one. And number two, Microsoft offered you a contract and you refuse to sign it. And now we're finding out that you were trying to get other things put in there. You're trying to get Redfall, you're trying to get Bethesda games. Your concern publicly is that Call of Duty is going to be taken off of the PlayStation, and Microsoft has offered you PlayStation. They've offered you a contract in a situation where it's rare to offer a 10-year contract for such a game. Bobby Kotick said he would stay over, and it does appear like they have some type of relationship. So he said, I'll stay over to ensure that everything goes well for Sony and that you get these games and that it continues to be on your platform. In your own internal documents, you're saying that you don't believe that Call of Duty is leaving the PlayStation. Yet, here we are in court. On the theme of leaks, once again, it was leaked in court because whoever was presenting this, whoever tried to redact it, I don't know, man, you're fired for sure. Now, from Jim Ryan's unredacted letter, it suggests that Call of Duty represents $800 million in PlayStation revenue in the United States alone. So that's around $1.5 billion worldwide. That's a lot of money. This game is a juggernaut. That's why they're not going to remove it off of the platform. And I think it's going to be very clear at the end of the day to the judge that Microsoft is not going to remove this game from the PlayStation. And the FTC, in my opinion, they're going to lose this case. Although they are doing a much better job presenting their case today, it's a lot more clearer. Still, the evidence doesn't support their theories. Now, Sony believes that nearly half of the PlayStation 5 owners also have a Nintendo Switch. Sony doesn't see the Nintendo Switch as a competitor, and PlayStation boss Jim Ryan poorly redacted letter shows us another reason why. According to SIE internal surveys, almost half of the PlayStation 5 owners in the United States also own a Nintendo Switch, which is less than 20% of PlayStation 5 owners in the United States that also own an Xbox Series X or S. And that is a trend that I've noticed. Xbox owners, PC owners, PlayStation 5 owners. The Nintendo Switch is, I don't know, it's just a popular console. A lot of people own it. Like, I own a Switch. I have 2 Switches. Make it make sense, but I do. So it is a popular console. So maybe that's why they're not too threatened by it, because they do have games that are in a different lane, but it is still competition. You think they want Nintendo to be selling more consoles than them? They don't. They want to outsell Nintendo. So please don't tell me they're not competition. Now, the FTC and Microsoft have continued arguing over whether the Switch is a competitor during the courtroom trial, and I told you the reasons. They don't want to add Switch into the mix because then it puts Xbox in third place, and if they're in third place, you can't be protecting Sony, right? Now, Nvidia's Jeff Fisher unsurprisingly said that he believes that PC gaming will always be better than consoles. Now, he says GeForce Now doesn't cannibalize the existing game market. Users typically use lower-end incompatible games, and Fisher went on to say that's how they access their games. I do believe believe accessibility does bring in new gamers to high-end PC gaming, and cloud gaming is a part of that. The FTC asked Nvidia cloud gaming offers a superior experience to Xbox, and Fisher replied it's similar or better than the Xbox experience. I believe we have capabilities of our tier of service that is better than the PlayStation service as well. Now they ask him about the cloud, and he goes, it will be ultimately successful in the end. He says it's his strong belief that cloud gaming has a profitable future. Now Sony has just revealed lots of high confidential information about his PlayStation business by mistake. As part of the FTC versus Microsoft hearing, Sony supplied documents from PlayStation chief Jim Ryan that includes redacted details on the margin Sony shares with publishers, its Call of Duty revenues, and even the cost of developing some games. It looks like Sony redacted the documents with a black Sharpie, but when you scan them, you can easily see them on the redaction. Oh man, Jim Ryan, he's gonna get fired after this. He is, because this deal, everything that we've seen so far, this deal is going through. The FTC has not proved its case, and I think ultimately he's going to be let go. There's a lot of secrets that were leaked today on both sides. Microsoft leaked some stuff. Well, not today. Last week some stuff was leaked, so let's just kind of be consistent here. I don't think it was something that was done on purpose. I think it was something that's very careless, and it was easy to catch. If you actually looked at the documents before you presented them, you would see that everything is still available. So I can see why some people are saying that some of this information was leaked to help the CMA, and I don't really know about all of that, but I know that it was a big mix-up. Okay, so we're going to do a recap now. The Nintendo Switch argument kicked off again, and I'm not even going to recap it because it's just ridiculous. Microsoft also argued how gamers spend their time, it matters. How many Xbox Game Pass Ultimate users actually use cloud gaming. The FTC picks apart Dr. Bailey's opinions. I would say tries to pick apart Dr. Bailey's opinions. I don't think they were successful. Then we heard from the vice president of Nvidia PC business, Jeff Fisher. He thinks that PC gaming will always be better than consoles. Now, this is the part I was telling you guys, don't get your feelings hurt. When some guys know that I play on PC, they get upset with that. And I'm not the type of guy that says, yeah, I'm on PC, so console sucks, because I still play my consoles. I play my Series X, I play my PlayStation 5, I play handhelds. I just like to game everywhere. And for me, Microsoft allows me to play my games where I want to. That's why I want this deal to go through, because it does benefit me as a Game Pass subscriber. But he is right. PC is always going to be ahead of consoles because you can update your PC, and always typically when the PC releases, it has hardware that is far superior than what is found in the console. Now, Nvidia might be a little bit steamed about Xbox dismissing the cloud gaming, and I can see why. When they're achieving 240 FPS on their games, that is a feat to accomplish. I was so impressed when I heard that. 240 FPS on the cloud, you're really not going to feel any latency. So in the future, I want to know more about that. And as this deal goes through, I want to see a partnership between Microsoft and Nvidia. Maybe they can share some technologies and get the xCloud service up to par. Now, the service is really good. I'm not saying it's a bad service, but honestly, Nvidia's service is better. Now, Satya Nadella is taking the stand. Now, this is where things are going to get spicy. Or I'm going to be honest with you guys, I thought they were going to get spicy, but he wasn't grilled too much on either side. It was pretty easy questioning from both of them. Now, they did ask some pressing questions. It's just the manner in which they asked him. And I got to say, presence does play a role in real life. When you have such a presence, it demands respect, and you could tell both lawyers respected him. Anyways, let's go on with it. Microsoft CEO is the most powerful figure testifying during this trial, and one of the few executives who's not focusing primarily on games. His name hasn't appeared that much on the Xbox versus PlayStation drama so far, but he's in a position to get questioned about Microsoft's role as a potential big tech monopolist, not just gaming one. The FTC is questioning Nadella first. The FTC lawyer questions Nadella first before Microsoft lawyers will speak to him. We'll likely hear Judge Corley asking Nadella questions too. Nadella is largely confirming facts about Microsoft's senior leadership team and in the earnings call right now. So they were asking him, do you judge Phil Spencer and his department on what he does? So the FTC begins questioning Nadella on the Xbox market share. Nadella is now looking at evidence that the FTC is submitting, its presentation about the Xbox Series S and X consoles, and how Microsoft took share for 2 quarters in a row, and how Microsoft was the market share leader in the US, Canada, UK, and Western Europe. Now, we know when the console first came out, Microsoft was really doing good. They came out the gate running, and they did take the first 2 quarters in a row, and that's when Microsoft declared that they were the share leaders in US, Canada, and the UK, and Western Europe. Now, that was at the launch of the consoles. Everybody with a brain knows that Microsoft is in 3rd place right now. They are far behind Sony, especially when it comes to the rest of the world. In North America, they're not as far behind, but they're still not the leader. So I don't understand what the FTC is doing here. And they started off the day pretty good. Now, the questioning here was okay. Later on in the day, you're going to see they fall flat on their face. It's embarrassing. But let's get there first. Now, the FTC is referring to Nadella's own self-assessment, which includes a senior leadership team, a metric to track performance on top Microsoft leaders. There's also an SLT metric slide for Microsoft gaming business with a series of footnotes and metrics. The document is confidential and highlights Microsoft's targets for the gaming business and its actual achievements. And that's when he answered the stuff about Phil Spencer's department. Now, Nadella goes on to say that cloud gaming also includes Xbox Live. I don't think of it as a strictly substitute for the console. I mean, at least the market feedback to date has been people love their consoles, people love their PCs, people love their phones, and use cloud gaming casually. Nadia says it's possible for cloud gaming to become a breakthrough market, but that's not something that has happened yet. Nadella says that streaming is a minor part of the definition of the cloud, which also includes Xbox Live. Just to make this clear, when I think about the cloud in the context of the Xbox pillars of content, cloud, and community, Xbox Live is a part of the cloud. So even when you're thinking about a console or a PC, the cloud is actually a very integral part to the experience. So it's not just about streaming alone. When I think about the cloud, streaming is still a part of the overall cloud. Now, the FTC reads a document from Microsoft saying it continues to lead the fast-growing gaming cloud market, and Nadella says, as a software company, I always think software first, so I always want to be able to work on all platforms. In the email, Nadella says that I want this to be like a Samsung TV-like socket for us. I want a socket as a device endpoint. I want to make it clear to the world that Microsoft is focused on cloud-first approach for xCloud Teams and Windows 365. I want to use every opportunity to make cloud mainstream. Now, this was kind of the quote of the day. He goes, I would like to get rid of the entire exclusives on consoles, but it's not for me to define, especially as a low share player in the console market, that the dominant player Sony has defined market competition using exclusives. I have no love for that word. And I believe them because Sony has so many exclusives and it's hard to compete with them. They're trying to buy Activision and Sony is doing everything in their power to stop this merger from going through. Why? Because they do not want Microsoft to compete. Because they know once this deal goes through, Microsoft is going to compete a lot better with Sony's PlayStation console. They know that gamers are going to enjoy playing these games in the Game Pass service. It's not about Call of Duty being on the PlayStation because they've been offered a contract. I've said that over and over again. And today we're going to get a definition on that. We're going to get the facts on why this is actually the case of Microsoft offering this to Sony and Sony not wanting it because they don't want Microsoft to succeed. Does cloud take away from the console? Nadella talks about the cloud gaming as an expanding gaming to more platforms. Satya Nadella says that one mechanism we want to use was cloud streaming as a way to bring more competition to the mobile platforms and bring sort of a more opportunity for more publishers. So this is to open up the market. I've said that before. This is not a market. This is going to be good for competitions. It's going to be good for everybody involved. And most people agree with this. The only ones really against this is Google and Sony. And Google didn't have the nerve to show up to court or to file with the FTC. Sony is. And Sony, we know the reason why you don't want this deal to go through is because you know Microsoft will be able to compete. They've offered you a contract and you've refused it time and time again. And I know I harp on this a lot, but it has to be known that all the things that Sony are crying about are easily solved by signing that contract that they fail to sign, that contract they're trying to get other games in their service. They're trying to get Starfield, other Bethesda titles. They're trying to negotiate a better deal for themselves to get Call of Duty. If Call of Duty is the issue, take the game. They're offering it to you for 10 years. So I'm not going to lie to you guys. Some of the testimony today was kind of boring. I was expecting a lot more fireworks. And I'll give you a little spoiler again. It does kind of heat up towards the end here. But yeah, man, the FTC, they started off pretty good. And now they're kind of pittering out. Satya Nadella was a missed opportunity. He answered all the questions well. And like, what can they say to the guy? You know, he also guaranteed 100% that Call of Duty will be on the PlayStation. He guaranteed it, that yes, I would put Call of Duty on the PlayStation. It makes no financial sense to remove Call of Duty from the PlayStation. Why would we do that? It generates too much income. It just doesn't make sense. And if anybody's looking at the real hard numbers of what Call of Duty does on the PlayStation, you're not going to throw away millions of dollars. I know some fanboys, they would do otherwise, but fanboys don't run companies. These guys, they want to make money. And if you have a franchise that's already established on multiple platforms, bringing in lots of money, you're not going to remove it off of that platform. I will say it does benefit you to have it or to own it in your platform because you're able to put it in the Game Pass service. That's going to be attractive to some gamers. You're also going to be making money off of other platforms. It's an attractive purchase for sure. And it's going to help Microsoft compete. And also, too, they're not going to have to go through the stuff that they went through, having to settle with an 80-20% split because they want the game on their platform. And I believe Sony still kept their 70-30 split. That's ridiculous. So here's the exact quote when he said that he's going to ship Call of Duty on the PlayStation. It makes no economic sense or no strategic sense. Our goal with Activision in particular is their content and our content. It's to get it on more platforms. That's what we've done with Office. That's what I want to do with gaming. Now, the lawyer asked, will you commit to delivering Call of Duty on the PlayStation? Satya responded with 100%. And that's it. That wraps up his testimony. Now, next up, Microsoft is calling an economics expert, Dennis Carlton, and he is here to contest the FTC's claims about competition and Microsoft's acquisition. Now, the FTC is trying to poke holes in Carlton's expertise before he can poke holes in its case. Now, the early questioning is about Microsoft's expertise, involves jabs about how much Carlton is getting paid. He gets $2,000 an hour, and I don't understand why it matters how much he's getting paid. It matters the information and the data that he has. You have to see if it was collected from a real place and if it all makes sense. It doesn't matter how much he's getting paid. Now, this guy, he's laying down all the facts. He's looking at all the numbers and reasons why this deal would affect Sony. And he comes to a conclusion that you're going to see later on that we've already come to here, that Sony just wants to block the deal. Now, he says putting Call of Duty on Game Pass is a prime motivation for the merger. He said Sony can avoid any ill effects by signing a deal with Microsoft. Now, we know that they've been offered the contract. I've been yelling it through this whole video. He also claims Sony is more motivated by blocking the merger than actually getting a good deal. They are, because they were offered these games. They're trying to get other Bethesda games that are exclusive on Microsoft's platform to come into the PlayStation ecosystem in order to sign this Call of Duty deal. That is scummy tactics. Now, the FTC is prodding at all these claims, but unfortunately, much of what we are asking him to read is under seal, so we're not hearing any of the details. What we do know is that the FTC is insinuating Carlton didn't meaningfully analyze the actual proposed deal, something Carlton denies. He said he actually saw the deal, but he's unable to say the terms of the deal because it's sealed. They know this. And they're starting to see that their case is unraveling, that they haven't proved their case. And you're going to see in the last part of today's testimony that they start to get really desperate. The judge gets annoyed. That's a key point. I can't paint that picture for you over this video. It's what I heard in the court, and it's the tone of her voice and the manner and some of the things and some of the questions that she asks that you can tell that she's annoyed. Now, Dr. Carlton is struggling here after the FTC lawyer questioned her expertise on how much he's being paid. I sense that Judge Corley is frustrated at some of his answers and at some of the FTC's questioning. Now, there are some tense exchanges here. Carlton is kind of struggling on the stand. The FTC lawyer is questioning him on his expertise and how much he's being paid. And the judge is kind of frustrated at some of his answers because she did kind of point him in the right direction to answer certain questions. She's also annoyed at the FTC's questioning. Now, the FTC says, are you not an expert of technology of video games? Dr. Carlton, correct. You're not an expert of the quality of Call of Duty games on Nintendo Switch? Dr. Carlton said, I'm not offering any opinion on that. Now, this guy is giving his expertise on the economy, on why this deal makes sense, and they're asking him on the quality of Call of Duty. They asked him some stupid questions. They really did. That made no sense. Asking him about the latency in the cloud. And do you know that if the server is further away from the gamer, that they're going to have a worse experience? What does it have to do with the model that he's looking at? What does it have to do with the financials? It has nothing to do with it. And they start grasping at straws, and I was frustrated. I can imagine that the judge was extremely frustrated because they should know better. Now, The Verge gets a shout out in court here, and the FTC said the Verge article is a public article, correct? It does not include all of the terms of the Nvidia agreement. Is this correct? Dr. Carlton responded, "I would assume so, yes." The FTC asked, "Especially since the terms of this agreement is confidential." And then the judge asked, "Did you read the Nvidia agreement?" Dr. Carlton said, "I can't remember. My recollection is I was trying to characterize the agreement, and this article characterized the agreement. Therefore, I relied on this article rather than me reading the agreement and me characterizing it." So he didn't read the actual Nvidia agreement. He got the details from The Verge. And right now, we're getting our details from The Verge. And I'm going to say that The Verge, their coverage is really good. So their details, I'm sure, were sound. But once again, this is the FTC trying hard to poke holes. Like anything, just throwing whatever they can at the wall, just hoping something sticks. And it's been the theme of this whole case. This morning, they kind of started off good with Bobby Kotick. They got him to admit that he doesn't like Game Pass. But ultimately, it doesn't matter if Activision is going to be sold to Microsoft. It'll be their company to do what they feel is fit. And they've already said that they're going to keep these games on PlayStation. They've offered Sony a contract. This is very important because this is going to come into play in the ruling. I truly believe this. Honestly, it got pretty tense. At one moment, the lawyer said to answer yes or no and not waste the court's time. And I was thinking, you're wasting the court's time asking these questions over and over again, and he's giving you the same answer. Like, he did kind of stumble because he was trying to understand the question. And he didn't read the Nvidia contracts. Those weren't in there. But he did read the contracts with Sony, and they were trying to downplay that. He did see the contract that Sony was offered for Call of Duty. Sony's not worried about Call of Duty not being on the PlayStation. They want to wreck this deal, and they're trying to get as much as they can in the process. He said it's not realistic for a foreclosure to happen, and we know this. And the FTC, they have to prove this. They did a little bit better with him here because, yeah, he was stumbling a little bit. But Microsoft's lawyers came in and they rectified all of that, and we ended the day. Tomorrow, they have a few more people to go through. I think one is a video deposition, and then we're going to go into the final arguments. And at this point in time, I got to say the FTC is done. There were points in time today where the judge even laughed at the FTC. At one point in time, she interjected for Dr. Carlton, and she said to the FTC, "I can answer that, yes," because they were asking stupid questions. And I gotta be honest with you, the cloud, it's not a market. That is obvious. I don't understand why you keep trying to hammer home this point. Even if you were right about the cloud, which you're not, it's still not a reason to block this deal. Maybe if the cloud was this big booming market and Microsoft was like 50% over it, 60% over it, I could understand. But this market barely exists. By Microsoft's own numbers, hardly anyone is using the cloud for gaming. They use it occasionally when they're downloading a game to play the game first to see if they, like the game or to get into the game. Sometimes myself, I use it if I'm maybe out on the road, I have some downtime, I might use it the odd time, but I'm not using it on the regular, and most gamers aren't. We like to play our games natively. That's why devices like the Rogue Ally exist. If everyone wanted to play on the cloud, the Rogue Ally wouldn't even be selling. People like to play their games natively. Cloud is just a nice option. And yes, the latency is part of it, but even so, people still want to play locally. They don't want to have to be reliant on the internet to play their game. If it's an online game, yes, we know the rules. But otherwise, we want to have the option to play games when and where we want to. I think cloud someday will be much bigger, but right now it's not going to happen. And they're trying to lay the investment. They're trying to lay down the bricks right now so they can build in this growing division. But it's non-existent. So your argument doesn't make sense. And all the evidence that we've seen through this case, I gotta say, it points to the FTC protecting Sony's interests. We hardly heard about the consumer. It's mostly Sony. Is Sony gonna have this game? Did you promise Sony to play this game? And it's all about Call of Duty, and I think that's very clear. Even the judge pointed that out. And if it's all about Call of Duty, and Microsoft offered them a contract, you have Satya Nadella saying under oath that 100% will put it on the PlayStation. You have Phil Spencer saying the same. You have the evidence of the contracts going out. You have the evidence of Jim Ryan saying he's not concerned about it. You have the evidence of Jim Ryan saying, I don't care. I just want to block this deal. I hope the FTC does their job. He's flying out to these different boards and saying whatever he can to get this deal blocked. But internally, he wasn't worried about this deal. I think what set in is Sony leadership. They didn't like this because this is going to allow Microsoft to compete. So they were trying to be slick and get Microsoft to commit to bringing some exclusive games onto the PlayStation platform. Microsoft was not falling for that. They said, you want Call of Duty? We're offering you Call of Duty. You know what? We're going to give it to you for 10 years. Their agreement is until 2024, and they're not promised the Call of Duty for that year. So they had no contract anyways. They would have to renegotiate. So they're really not owed anything. And Microsoft offered them a 10-year contract. You cannot tell me that the judge is not going to see that and not rule in favor of Microsoft. Now, these are the US court systems. Anything can happen. But based on the evidence and what we've seen so far, this is my take on it. The FTC has no case. They didn't do their due diligence. They didn't look at the facts, and they didn't look at Sony. Because if they looked at Sony and all their practices, it would have been clear, and I don't think we'd be in this position. I think it's all political. They want to come out and say, hey, we're going against big business without looking at the facts. They're going for clout. They don't care if they lose. I read some report, or I saw some newscast that they said they don't care if they lose. They just want to be able to show their face to big corporations to know, hey, we're here and we're going to give you a hard time. And I don't want to get too political because this is all about gaming, but in my opinion, that's not good. And I think those people should be replaced. That should not be your job. Your job should be to legitimately stop bad mergers from taking place. This is not a bad merger. These are two American companies wanting to do business. Microsoft is not the market leader. Sony is the market leader. And you're listening to their complaints, and you're not looking at the evidence that shows that they're the market leader. And for that reason alone, the FTC deserves to lose this case. Anyways, I wonder what you guys think about all of this. I'm really tired. These videos take a long time to do. Today was a doozy. We got Satya Nadella. We got him on stand. And he said that he doesn't really like exclusives. He wishes that it didn't exist. But he understands that they're in a business where exclusives matter. And they're in third place, so he's in no position to dictate anything about that. He leaves all the decisions to Phil Spencer on what games are exclusive. He doesn't make the decisions on that. Phil Spencer just reports to him. And Phil Spencer's department is doing good. Although they set the expectations low, or lower according to Nadella, they're doing better than expected. So to all you people out there saying that Phil Spencer should be fired, there you go. The division is doing pretty good. And they are doing good. They're doing good with Game Pass. They're doing good with some of their exclusives. Halo was successful. I expect Starfield to be successful. And if this deal goes through, I do believe that Microsoft is on a path to at least parity with the PlayStation. I would say in North America, for sure, 100%. This is definitely going to help Xbox. It's going to help us Xbox gamers. We're going to have these games in Game Pass. And honestly, tell you guys, I just want this all to be over. This has been so long. And yeah, I'm tired, man. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Please like, share, and subscribe.